นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังกุณุตรังอุปัชฌายังนัมมัสสามิ
A long time ago, when I was still a school boy, I was very poor at science. Science didn't have much interest in science. And at the beginning of one new year, I thought I'd won the jackpot because we were given new textbooks. And I looked through the book and found that the section at the back with the answer to all the exercises in the book was still there, and mostly in the textbooks the teachers would take out that section. And I thought, well, this year physics is going to be a lot easier than in the previous years. I thought the teacher had made some mistake. And then I realized, of course, that knowing the answer to the question didn't really help that much, because you had to prove to the teacher the steps in the argument that led from the question to the answer. And in the absence of those steps, then you wouldn't pass any tests or exams. So I often remembered this lesson, and I think that it's applicable to all of us who study the Dhamma. And especially if you study the more difficult areas of the Dhamma, like the Abhidhamma. It's like there's a lot of hard work to learn it. So you feel that you've gained something. It's like you've got some answers. But the question is how to create the right connection between your questions and your answers. So as Buddhists, we consider that life is asking us questions. Or asking us, what are we doing with our lives? And then the words of the Buddha himself, days and nights are relentlessly passing. What are we doing with our meaning, how are we acting, how are we speaking, how are we using our minds? Given that death can come at any moment, how confident are we that we are ready for whatever is to come? So this sense of readiness is the essential meaning of the word we say, heedful. Someone is heedful, meaning that they're ready for whatever may occur, whether it's something that they like, something they dislike, something that's expected, or something unexpected. So as Buddhists, we're trying to develop that quality of mindfulness and awareness, where we don't feel this need to try to control situations or control the people around us, because we are confident that whatever occurs, we have the tools that we need to deal with it. So we don't have a step-by-step plan saying, if this happens, I will do that. But it's this general sense of understanding the way things appear, the way things grow, the way things wane, the way things disappear. When I was an anagarika, where I was keeping 8 precepts and living with Lumpur Sumeto in England, there was a visitor who challenged him and said, "You monks are pacifists, aren't you?" "Yes." So what would happen if a madman was to attack your mother with a knife? What would you do? Given that you hold the Vinaya so dearly, you'd rather, and in the text it say you would rather die than break a precept. What would you do? And I thought that Lumpur Sumeto's answer was a very wise one. And he said, "I cannot tell you exactly what I would do in that kind of hypothetical situation. But as long as I maintain my practice of the Eightfold Path and of mindfulness, then I am confident that I would do the right thing." So what the right thing might be is not something that you can decide beforehand, because there are so many conditions, so much of the context is omitted when we devise these moral dilemmas, and then that's the reason why they can be misleading. But so we don't have to have like a whole range of Buddhist answers to cover every eventuality, but we need to be developing that quality of awareness that we can say more or less, let it come, whatever arises, I'm ready. So one of the most important words, and one that's perhaps not that well known, except amongst scholars, is the word Aseka Pugala. So it's one of the names given, or one of the epithets of an arahant, a fully enlightened being. So Seka is the same word as Sikha or training, and Aseka means beyond the training, and a Pugala is a person. So the arahant is a person who has finished the work. He's graduated. Okay, so we can say the arahant is a graduate. And the reason the Buddha chose this word, or one of the reasons, I think is it's important to understand that the Buddha Dhamma and the Buddhist religion is essentially an education system. So the dominant view and dominant understanding of religions is that they are essentially belief systems. And this is why people who are members of belief system religions find Buddhism so difficult to understand because they try to understand it in terms of beliefs. So often you'll find perhaps a Christian friend or a Muslim friend, Jewish friend, say, oh, you're a Buddhist, you believe in rebirth, don't you? Or you're a Buddhist, you believe in this and believe in that. So the idea is that you can summarize a religious tradition in terms of its dogmas or its most important beliefs that members of that religion sign up for. But that's not the case in Buddhism. And we shouldn't allow ourselves to accept that idea of Buddhism, that it's a set of beliefs that we live by. But the Buddhist teachings are a holistic, extremely sophisticated and complete system of education. And the word for education in the time of the Buddha is this word sikha, which is usually translated as training. But this is really a synonym. It means the same thing. So we have the threefold training or the threefold education. So for this reason, the whole idea of like being a practicing Buddhist. So we say, oh, he's like a practicing Christian or a non-practicing Christian. In Buddhism, there's no such thing as a non-practicing Buddhist. You can't, because Buddhism, to be a Buddhist means to practice. To be a Buddhist, you become a Buddhist, you express your Buddhist identity by taking on the Buddha's education. So it's not just a matter of believing in that there is such a thing as enlightenment, or believing that there is such a thing as merit, but it's taking these teachings and putting them to the test in your life. So the difference between these two ideas about what a religion might be are clearly revealed in the Buddhist attitude to faith. On one occasion, a Brahmin went to visit the Buddha, and the Buddha pointed to Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana, the great disciples, and he said, these are the great disciples, they are completely faithless. They have no faith. So this was, in one sense, the Buddha's sense of humor showing itself again. But he was making a very important point that faith has an important role in leading you onwards to the truth. But once you have realized the truth, you don't have to believe it in it anymore. So you might have all kinds of beliefs about London, for instance, what London is like. You might have heard about it or seen it in movies and so on. And you have various beliefs about it. But if you had the opportunity to go to London, then you don't have to believe those things anymore. It's not belief in the same way because you verified your ideas about it. So in Buddhism we have certain beliefs, particularly in the beginning of our practice, and they can be summarized in two points. First is the belief in the enlightenment of the Buddha, and secondly is the belief in the law of karma. These are absolutely fundamental to our life and our progress in the Buddha's teachings. But let's take this first point and look at it in some more detail, because this is not just a belief that something did or did not happen 2,600 years ago under a tree in northeastern India. The point is that prior to his enlightenment, the Buddha was an ordinary human being, or you can say he was a very special human being, in that he had long ago made the vow to become a Buddha, and he had been cultivating the causes and conditions for Buddhahood for an unimaginably long time. But until that moment of enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he was not a Buddha, he was a human being. And so he gained enlightenment as a human being. And, or to put it another way, as a representative of the human race. And by realizing enlightenment, the Buddha demonstrated the potential of the human being for enlightenment. This is the meaning to be derived from that event 2,000 and more years ago in India. The Buddha proved the human potential for enlightenment. Now, if we can take on that conviction, there's a further step. And this is perhaps the most important step, because from this general belief in the human potential for enlightenment, we assert our own potential for enlightenment. So this is the progression, this is the profound meaning of this leap of faith. We can't prove, any of us, what actually happened 2,600 years ago, no matter how hard you meditate and how hard you study, you won't be able to prove that this actually happened. So this is an article of faith. But it's not simply a dogma, this happened and I believe it happened. But it leads onwards. This is an open icon. It's a Dhamma that leads onwards. It leads onwards to a belief about our own life. And the belief is that I have the potential as a human being, whether I'm an Asian or a Caucasian, a man or a woman, I have the potential for enlightenment within me. And so from there, we are faced with a challenge. See, it doesn't stop there. This is the thing about Buddhist faith. It's always leading onwards. So from that faith, yes, I have the potential for enlightenment. So how is that potential realized? It's realized by abandoning the unwholesome, developing the wholesome, and purifying the heart. This is another formulation of this education that the Buddha gave to us. So if we believe that, yes, we have the potential for enlightenment, if we have any integrity and commitment, then we have to put it to the test. So we have to start to try to abandon the unwholesome and see, is it actually possible? And to develop the wholesome and to try to purify the mind. So this is how we put our faith to the test. It's not just a matter of believing in something and that's the end of it. Now I'm a Buddhist. because it's not believing about something outside of you. It's believing about something that you can and should do during this precious life as a human being. So if you believe that you can abandon the unwholesome, you should try. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe the Buddha's wrong. You need at least to find out for yourself. The Buddha said that you can develop, you can cultivate the wholesome. So you try, put it to the test. Was the Buddha right? And you try to purify your heart. So the duty, the responsibility that arises simultaneously with this act of faith is you have to put it to the test. So with other religious traditions, it's very different. You either believe something happened or you don't believe it. But here, it's put it to the test. Give it a try. This is why I'm saying that this effort arises naturally from faith. The effort to test, to put to the test the things that you believe in, because they are concerned with your life. They're not something outside of you. So if looked at in this perspective, you can see that sometimes when you hear these criticisms that Buddhism is a pessimistic religion, Buddhism just teaches that everything is suffering. What a miserable religion. But in fact, we can probably say that the Buddhism has the most positive understanding of the human condition, in that it asserts the inherent potential of human being for enlightenment. And the Buddha is saying that with all of the greed and the hatred and the delusion and the jealousies and the selfishness and all of those dark forces and what we call defilements of mind, there is no defilement which is an inherent part of the human heart. There is nothing there which is fixed. So if you have a religious tradition that believes that the human heart is fundamentally flawed, then it's very difficult to develop a system of training. So it would be like you have a lump of coal and you're given, and someone says, why don't you try to burnish that coal and make it shine and make it bright and beautiful? And you say, well, no, this coal is coal. You can rub the coal and whatever you do to coal will never be bright and shiny. But if you have if you're given an uncut diamond and you say, make that beautiful, then if you know the method and you apply yourself correctly, you can make a beautiful jewel. So this is the idea that we have, is that the human heart is not a black lump of coal, it's an uncut diamond. So an uncut diamond is not beautiful unless you do something about it. You can't just say, I've got a diamond. It's meaningless unless you know how to work on that uncut diamond and cut it and polish it and bring out the beauty which lies within it. This is why, as Buddhists, we are practicing Buddhists. There's no such thing as a non-practicing Buddhist. Say, well, yeah, I'm a Buddhist. I believe in Buddhism, but I haven't really got round to practicing yet. This is a fallacy. So in Thailand, where Thailand is culturally, a Theravada Buddhist nation, But there are a lot of people who, have this idea that they're not yet ready to practice, or think you have to be, get old and then you can start to practice. And so I have an analogy which is sort of teasing people. I say, let's say someone goes for a job, applies for a job in a hospital, and they say, I'd like to work as a doctor in this hospital. And the director of the hospital says, where did you graduate? From Sirirat Hospital or Mahidol Hospital, it's the big teaching hospitals or did you graduate overseas? And they said, well, no. So you're still a medical student? No, I don't really have time yet to study medicine. They said, well, how on earth do you expect to be a doctor in this hospital? He said, it's in my blood. Yeah, my parents are doctors. My granddaughters are doctors. So I'm just a doctor. I've been a doctor since I was born. And this is every bit as foolish an idea as saying, yes, I'm a Buddhist. They say, well, on what grounds do you consider yourself a Buddhist? Do you keep precepts? Do you practice meditation? In what does your Buddhist identity consist of? And you say, I'm a Buddhist from birth. My parents are Buddhists. My grandparents are Buddhists. And it doesn't work like that. You're a Buddhist through the way you live in the world. So in the belief system religions, like belief trumps everything. You can kill. I mean, some religions, you can kill other human beings. As long as you don't do it for yourself, but you're doing it for your religion, because you have a belief, you have a faith that what you're doing is right, or there's some passage that you can quote in your holy book. But in Buddhism, it's the quality of your actions, your intention, that determines the goodness of your actions, not what you believe. So, in other words, and this is going on to the second of these points. We believe in law of karma, which means that the intention, and whether your intention to act is influenced by defilement or not, determines the results of the action. So, and your beliefs and your understanding and your rationalization for your actions will affect the severity or the intensity of the karma, but not whether or not the karma is wholesome or unwholesome. So that's maybe a little bit hard to follow. Let me give an example, that the intention to kill, to take life, is always bad karma, whatever the situation. But if you were conscripted into the army and forced to go and fight, and you're not, and you had no sense of anger and aversion to the enemy, you felt sorry for them, or you felt some sympathy with their position. And when you shoot somebody, you really don't want to do it, but you have no choice, then it would still be bad karma, because there is the intention to pull the trigger and somebody dies. That's the determinant. There's the intention to kill in the mind. That's the significant factor. But the other, the reasons are mitigating factors, which means that the karma will be, for an act of killing, will be relatively mild. Whereas if you develop a hatred of someone, and particularly someone who's a benefactor, as a good person, a benefactor, someone who's done you kindness before, and you sit and you think about it and you plan, the way that you can kill that person that inflicts the maximum amount of pain and anguish. Then if you were to kill someone, the intention to kill is the same, but all those other mental factors exaggerate or increase the severity of the karma. So the karma itself, the bad karma, is determined by the intention, but the severity is determined by all these other factors. But it's not because, I didn't really want to do it, or, I didn't realize. No, but if you had the intention to kill, that is the karmic factor. So this is our understanding in Buddhism, and we have to keep coming back to that again and again. And what that means is that we create our own life. We are responsible for the quality of our life. Ultimately, as Buddhists, we say, the buck stops here. Yeah. So when you understand that, firstly, you see that, for instance, nobody can make you suffer. So we say, it's such a bad time right now. So this person, he made me so unhappy. He treated me so badly, he made me suffer so awfully. Or this happened and that happened, it just made me so upset. So this is a case of where our language undoes us. Our language creates problems, or a lack of mindfulness in language, or just adopting the usual way of speaking and not looking at what's really going on. So if somebody abuses you, do they make you suffer? So to expand upon this point, let me take another example here. If you were to put your hand in the fire, your skin would burn. It'd be painful. If an evil person was to put their hand in the fire, their skin would burn. If an arahant or a bodhisattva was to put their hand in the fire, it would burn, because this is the nature of human skin. This is what happens when fire comes into contact with skin. So we could say that the pain arises because of the fire, okay? And anybody who puts their hand in the fire would have an almost identical result. But mental pain is not like that, is it? So somebody might abuse you and say terrible things, and one person might be terribly upset. Another person might be indifferent. Another person might spread loving kindness to that person. So it's not like a fixed thing, like the hand in the fire. Because what's happening, physically, you hear something, there's sound impinging on the ear, and you interpret it. And that interpretation of it is something that comes from you. It's not something that comes from the person who's abusing you. And Luang Por Chah used to give an example. Two people walking along the road. There's a man walking on the other side of the road who starts abusing the person here and saying horrible things about him, and it feels very bad. And then his friend says, calm down. Look, that guy, he's crazy, he has a mental illness, he doesn't know what he's saying. And so although that person continues to say these nasty, terrible things, the person doesn't feel the same way anymore because he has a new understanding of what's going on. So this is how we can take responsibility for our lives. Now, there's a very important point to be made here in that some people will understand Buddhism teaches don't blame other people for your suffering, don't blame the situation you find, blame yourself. And that's not what the Buddha is teaching. But the Buddha is saying that we can discriminate between causes and conditions. So if somebody is treating you badly and acting unjustly towards you or trying to make life difficult for you, then they are creating the conditions for you to suffer. But ultimately, whether or not you suffer is a function of your inner maturity, the amount of the Buddha's education that you have taken on and the extent to which you have learned the teachings, learned the lessons that the Buddha is teaching you. You know how to look after your mind. So if somebody is treating you badly or you're in an unjust situation, then your first responsibility is to protect your mind and not to suffer. But that's not the end of the story, because once you have looked after, you can protect your heart, you still have to deal with the external situation. If it's incorrect or someone's acting badly, then they may need some feedback, or it doesn't mean that you just become passive and that your job is just just to deal with it. So at the time of the Buddha, the word that he used most often to refer to his body of teachings was not Buddhism. That's a much later name. But he referred to it most often as the Dhamma Vinaya. So the Dhamma is the inner teaching and the Vinaya is the external teaching. So the practice of Vinaya, although the word Vinaya is generally understood to refer to the monk's discipline, in fact it has a wider, more profound meaning. And it means the way that we set up our life together in families and in communities so as to most effectively support the practice of Dhamma. And so that can be in verbal agreements and conventions and regulations and laws and customs. All of these things for like a whole network of skillful means by which you facilitate the practice of Dhamma. And this is and so the highest expression of this is the monk's discipline, because here the Buddha himself was the one who created the conventions, and in his genius he devised training rules and customs and so on and so forth to create the maximum, the very best possible conditions for practice of Dhamma. But as lay Buddhists, you take the general principle on board and you try to apply it in your communities in ways that are most supportive of practice. There's something I've been talking about a lot the last few days, is that sila practice of the 5 precepts is essentially an offering, a gift of safety to the people around you, because for Vinaya, the most essential need of human being is the need to feel safe. So as Buddhists, we say, yeah, I still have a lot of defilements, I'm working on them, I still have greed and hatred and delusion and all these things, and it's going to take some time before I can really do much about these. But in the meantime, I promise you, no matter how angry and how much resentment I might feel towards you sometimes, even though I love you, is I will not abuse you physically or verbally. And immediately when you hear someone like that and you know that they mean it, you can relax, you feel safe. If someone says to you, don't worry about your possessions, yes, so I have some of the things I feel really jealous that you've got those things and I would really like, but I would never take anything that doesn't belong to you. You know, as a couple, you say, you don't have to worry. I still have sexual desires. Sometimes I find other people sexually attractive. This is just a natural part of being a human being. But I will never act upon those feelings. I will never betray you. I will never go behind your back and on the basis of those feelings cheat on you or even have any kind of private communications with someone that I know would upset you. And you can feel safe in a relationship. It's not so idealistic. You know, it's not unreasonable. It's something that is doable and practical. And although speaking the truth is sometimes embarrassing and it's difficult and it's time-consuming and it brings up a lot of fear of rejection and fear, that's why it's such a good practice. I will never lie to you. You know, I will never deceive you. And the Buddha says, this is the greatest gift you can give to another human being. You know, if you want to give a great gift, you don't need a lot of money. You give the gift of precepts. That's the most wonderful thing you can give to people around you. But the first 4 precepts will only be stable, and you can only give that. They will only provide that sense of safety when you're also keeping the 5th precept. Because if you compromise on that, you can't sustain that same level of mindfulness, integrity, and commitment to the well-being of others. So you keep the 5th precept as well. And don't take any drugs of intoxicants, whether they're legal or illegal. So this is Vinaya. You know, this is the idea of Vinaya. And it's not restricted to precepts. I often encourage my students and families in Thailand to sit down together, grandparents, parents, children, all those are living together, and devise a family constitution. And so have agreements that everyone can sign up for. So everyone signs their name and frames it and puts it up on the wall. You know, this is our constitution. These are our values as a family. These are our agreements and how we practice, how we speak with each other. So you don't have to have fights and arguments about every single point, because you have an agreement that you've voluntarily signed up for. So it's not an argument between parents and children. It's an argument between the person who's behaving badly and their promise, whether or not they're living up to the promises and commitments they made. So in short, as I was saying just now, the suffering that we have is not caused by anybody else. Ultimately, it's up to us whether or not we suffer. So the things that occur in people's behavior, the situation, are triggers. Or it's somebody knocking on the door and asking you to open it. But you don't have to open the door. You don't have to open the door to that kind of stimulus. ultimately you have that power, or you can develop that power. You have the potential to exercise that power to refuse to suffer. You can see, if I was to open that door, things would get really bad, but you don't have to. And you no longer need to do that. So that's the essential part of the practice. But at the same time, your commitment to the well-being of your family and community is to deal with those kinds of triggers as well, to try to reduce the amount of triggers and people behaving in ways that are encouraging or tempting and pressurizing people to lose their sense of mindfulness and wisdom. So we believe that the Buddha was enlightened, and his enlightenment was the enlightenment as a human being, whereby he proved the human potential for enlightenment. And as all of us here are human beings, we can conclude from that we all, every one of us, possesses this potential for enlightenment, and seeking to realize that potential is what gives our life meaning, purpose, grounding, integrity, happiness. So there's so many people in the world today who are lost. They don't really know what they're doing. And we were talking this morning about this funny idea people have of living in the real world. I mean, this is a very sophisticated idea that people just spout. You're off in a monastery and you're meditating and you're not in the real world. So this idea, they're in the real world, they know what the real world is, and they have also a concept of an unreal world, which they're not in. So it's just one of these things people say to justify their way of life. So the way I see so many of the people who say, I'm in the real world, I'm reminded of these cartoons. I don't know if you used to, when you were small, you used to watch this cartoon called Roadrunner. But it's not just, but there's a general convention in the universe of cartoons. There's certain laws that pertain to the law of cartoons. And one is that if you run over the edge of a cliff, as long as you keep running and you don't look down, you won't fall. And you think, that cartoon, people are, and then suddenly, they look, and then they fall. The moment they, and so my view of most people in the so-called real world, they're the people they've just run over the edge of the cliff and they're still running and they haven't looked down yet. So, this is a, heedlessness that comes from this refusal and fear of being alone. To repeat something I was speaking about this morning again, challenge somebody who thinks they live in the real world to go into a room with no television, no iPad, no telephone, no books, no distractions, no enjoyments, and say, stay in that room for a day, and you're forbidden from falling asleep. You can't sleep. You have to be awake. And this is the most stunning thing, that's probably the most frightening and impossible thing for most human beings, just to be alone and with themselves. So in any country which, most civilized countries abolish capital punishment. So what's the most severe punishment that the state can impose upon a criminal? Solitary confinement. So this is considered to be the worst possible thing, to be alone. And yet, that interest and willingness and interest in learning about the real world of the body and the mind, of form, of feelings, of perceptions, of thoughts and emotions and sense consciousness, this is the way to liberation. So we're putting things to the test. We're starting to become the seika, the trainer. We're someone who is undertaking the Buddha's education. And we're learning and we're making mistakes and we're going up and going down, and it's not a stairway to heaven, it's like snakes and ladders, and that's all part of it. But if we're not thinking we have to do something in order to get some result, but our intention is to learn, and we take joy in learning. This is the essence of lifetime learning, and that ability to see things as an opportunity to learn. And you're meditating and you have all kinds of obstacles, then that's your learning right now. It's not, don't get depressed or discouraged because you have a lot of agitation or sleepiness and dullness and desires in your mind. That is your curriculum. This is right now in your practice. This is how you express yourself as a Buddhist. You learn about these things and you learn about how they arise. You learn about what feeds them. You learn about what starves them. You learn how to let go of them. So this is constant learning, and the things that you have to learn are constantly changing, becoming usually more subtle. But you can never just sit back on your haunches and relax until you reach the state of the graduate or the arahant. You're still someone who is in need of training, is in need of this the education. So many people know that the Buddha taught us to be content, but why? Why should we be content? And the Buddha's not teaching us to be content, and that's the end of it. But contentment with relation to the material world is to free up our energy, our time, to devote ourselves more effectively to this training. So it's not like more is better, and the more you have, the better it is. You're saying, how much wealth do I need? How much comfort do I need to provide the platform for growth in Dhamma? So it's not a super ascetic standard here. You have to be super frugal and have no enjoyments in your life and just have like sort of the really poor quality things, and that's like to be a really good Buddhist. No, you can have comforts and conveniences in your life, but the point is that you're always aware that these things don't become an end in themselves, and it's always to provide a sufficient platform or the best platform for growth in Dhamma. But together with the teaching of contentment with regard to the material requisites on which we depend for our life, the Buddha also taught discontent. And the Buddha was asked on one occasion, immediately prior to your enlightenment, what were the most important factors that sort of led to that final jump, that final breakthrough? And the Buddha identified two factors. One was consistent, unremitting effort. So not just, really going at it for a while and having a bit of a holiday, but just constant, consistent effort. And the second was discontent in the wholesome Dhammas that I had already developed. So the Buddha was content with his material circumstances, but discontent with the spiritual progress that he made. He's always moving on, never saying, this is good enough. This is enough for me. Because before this, the Buddha was so has so much peace, and he was developed so many good qualities, he would have been quite happy just to stopped before enlightenment, and nobody even knew there was such a thing as enlightenment. But because this questing nature of the bodhisattva, always moving onwards, never saying enough, never becoming complacent, that he was able to realize enlightenment and to share the teachings to which all of us, 2,600 years later, are still able to benefit from. In Buddhist countries, people are, and I'm sure that you've probably had the chance of paying respect to Buddha relics, and there's a whole culture around Buddha relics, and people very excited and filled with rapture with the Buddha relics. For me, the true Buddha relics are not in these incredible pieces of bright jewel-like stones, but it's the teachings in the sutta. When you read a sutta, and you read this Pali in the sutta, or you chant, these are words that came from the mouth of the fully enlightened Buddha. And if those aren't relics, then what are relics? Yeah. And if you see a Buddha relic in a stupa, maybe it makes all the hair on your back stand up, and you feel rapture, and that's a wonderful thing. But the relics of the teachings in the suttas and the Vinaya, these have content as well. These can still lead us onwards and help us in our life and practice as well. So these are the most marvelous Buddha relics, and that it's so wonderful that 2,600 years ago we still have access to these teachings, and we can still put them to the test in our life, because the Buddha didn't want us to blindly believe them. He said, take these away and put them to the test in your life until you see for yourself that they're true. Not just on the authority of the Buddha, although we have great faith in the Buddha and the Buddha's wisdom, but yet that's not enough. So the Kalama Sutta sometimes is explained as we just discard the authority of the Buddha and the authority of the Arahants. That's not the point. The Buddha says we greatly appreciate the authority of the Buddha, the authority and the experience of the Arya Sangha, of the Arahants. But ultimately, that's not enough. You have to go even further. So it's not saying don't pay any attention to authorities. It's saying make use of those authorities, but you still have to go that one step further and verify it for yourself. And so you know as a direct experience that the Buddha's teachings are true. So this is the discourse that I would like to offer you this evening.